Ancient Africa. Egypt nestled along the banks of the Nile River. Egypt was one of the first river valley civilizations. The longest river in the world, the Nile, flows north through Africa for over 4,000 miles, 6,437 kilometers. It splits into multiple channels in a delta just before emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile Delta is called Lower Egypt. The land south of it is called Upper Egypt. The Nile's annual flooding deposited rich dirt soil on the riverbanks. This land was called Kemet, or Black Land, and the dry desert was called Red Land. The Kemet was perfect farming, leading to a surplus of food and a well-fed people. The regular flooding led to accurate recording of the calendar dates, times, and numbers. The Nile was also perfect for transportation and communication. Hapi, the Egyptian god of the Nile, was praised highly by the people, along with Amun-Re, the king of the gods, Isis, the goddess of healing, motherhood, and many other things, and Isis's husband Osiris,
the god of the afterlife. The Egyptians had thousands of gods, including many female gods. Egyptian rule. Egypt was ruled by 31 different dynasties over 2,317 years, divided into 3 periods. A pharaoh ruled Egypt with absolute power. Whatever the pharaoh decided was law. Pharaoh had so much power they were considered gods. The Old Kingdom, 2700 BCE, 2200 BCE, and Middle Kingdom, 2100 BCE, 1700 BCE. King Memes created the first united Egyptian dynasty when he joined Upper and Lower Egypt, the Old Kingdom. He built his capital city Memphis near modern-day Cairo. The Old Kingdom also saw the construction of the approximately 138 Great Pyramids of Egypt, which were built for the burial of pharaohs and of Egypt, which were the annual flooding of the Nile. Farmers couldn't work in the fields, so they were put to work building pyramids. The Egyptians used their great knowledge of math, specifically geometry, to build these massive pyramids. Historians estimate that the largest of the Egyptian pyramids, the Great Pyramid at Giza, took 20 years, up to 100,000 workers, and more than 2 million stones to build. The Great Sphinx, a giant statue that is half man and half lion, was built to protect the Great Pyramid. Some famous pharaoh of the Old Kingdom were Djoser, had the first pyramid built for him by his vizier architect doctor. Imhotep Khufu Khafra and Menkaura oversaw the building of the pyramids at Giza. The Middle Kingdom was stable period of expansion. Kush, or Nubia, an area south of Egypt, was conquered. Pharaohs provided aid for public projects, such as draining swampland and digging canals. The New Kingdom, 1550 BCE, 1070 BCE, and King Thutmose III was the 6th ruler of the New Kingdom, but because he was only about 3 years old, his stepmother, Hatshepsut, ruled for him, acting as regent for the first 2 decades of his reign. Hatshepsut was a mostly peaceful leader who encouraged trade with cities in other parts of Africa, such as Punt on the east coast. This exchange introduced ivory and incense to Egypt. When it was Thutmose III's turn to rule, he led an army of 20,000 in conquering lands and extending Egypt's control into Syria and Palestine. One of the most famous Egyptian pharaohs to people today, King Tutankhamun, or King Tuti, was crowned at 9 years old and ruled from approximately 1336 to 1327 BCE. King Tut lived only until he was 19. He was buried in a tomb containing over 5,000 valuable objects, which were meant to accompany him into the afterlife. King Tut's body was mummified, which means that it was preserved. Egyptians believed the soul could continue its life after death, but it needed the body as a sort of home base. They buried mummies deep below the desert where the cool temperature would help preserve them. The Egyptians gained extensive knowledge of human anatomy and surgery from the process of mummification. The New Kingdom collapsed in 1070 BCE. Alexander the Great of Macedonia eventually conquered Egypt in about 332 BCE. In 51 BCE, Queen Cleopatra VII became the last Macedonian ruler. She waged war with factions of the Roman Empire. Egypt fell to the Roman Empire, and Cleopatra's rule ended in 30 BCE. Some other famous pharaohs of the New Kingdom, Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Akhenaten, the ruler before King Tut, tried to replace the Egyptian god with monotheism and focus worship on the sun god, Aten. He was originally called Amenhotep IV, but changed his name to honor his god. His wife Nefertiti, whose name meant a beautiful woman has come, was considered one of the most beautiful queen of Egypt. Ramses the Great reigned for 66 years 1279 to 1213 BCE, was known as a great warrior, and signed the world's first no-peace treaty with his enemies, the Hittites. He also had many monuments built that can still be seen today, such as the temples at Abu Simbel. The Egyptians created beautiful illustrations that to modern eyes look a lot alike. Artists and sculptors were expected to follow a formula, not come up with original ideas. For instance, Egyptians are often pictured in a half-profile pose, partly facing forward, partly facing to the side. So while the art was lovely and consistent, and although artists sometimes drew fun sketches, they did not use a new style for thousands of years.